have Slim Smith with us here tonight to give a little talk on early trapping, compare the old traps with some of the new ones, and generally explain what the old-timers had to put up with, and all the money they used to make in the early days. Don't make much now, do they, Slim? Okay.
No, we don't make much now. No, that's for sure not. Okay, I'll just run through a few things here. Before I get on to the methods of trapping and that sort of thing, I wonder if I might go back a little further than that. And because you people are interested in history, perhaps I can pass on a bit of history to you. As you know, our fur trade here in Canada, really the Hudson Bay Company was a prime mover in the early days. And you hear of posts that they had at Fort St. John and Fort Nelson and Fort Fraser in the North Country, but you never hear anything of our country here. And yet actually the Hudson Bay Company did come into this country and into the East Kootenay in 1860. I was raised near Fort Hill, Idaho, at a place called Huscroft. It's about 7 miles south of Creston. And we did all our shopping, our trading, or whatever at Fort Hill at that time. And a friend of our family's there was a family by the name of McLaughlin. And we lived about 2.5 miles from there. But anyway, on the weekends it used to be, I would go down, I would stay with this McLaughlin family. And believe it or not, they had picture shows in those days, but there were silent ones. And that, I can remember that quite well, though I was only about 5 or 6 years old at the time. The grandfather of the family was a man by the name of Joe McLaughlin. And he, at that time, would have been around 90 years old. And you can visualize this myself, what goes together, an old man and a boy. And I used to sit and talk to this Joe McLaughlin and other children as well. And of course he used to tell us the stories of the early days. Now they came in, the first post was built at Lake Windermere around the 1860s. And a man by the name of Alex McDonald was in charge of that post. I think all the clan McDonald must have worked for the Hudson Bay Company, because any history you read about them, there's McDonald's. But anyway, the first winter, or the first year they came in, they built the fort or the post at Lake Windermere, and Alec McDonald was to stay there and run that. The following year, or the next 2 years, I couldn't be sure, but there was another post put in at what we know now as Libby, and this was the post that McLaughlin took over. The third post was put in at Bonnesbury, Idaho, which is about 20 miles south of Creston, in Idaho. And here we had Alex Swanson, who was the factor there. All these men took Indian wives, and the grandson of Alex Swanson, when I was growing up, was the chief of the Indian band at Creston, and we knew him quite well. At that time, believe it, according to this old man's story, and I can remember it so well. It's funny, the things happened last week I can't remember, but I can sure remember talking to him because he was so interesting. But the first winter they come in there, they just about starved to death. If it hadn't been for the fish in the lake, they would have starved to death, because there was no game in the East Kootenay at that time. Now that's hard to believe today when we drive over there, go hunting in the fall, and there's no end of elk there and deer. But the Indians, they made a trip every fall out to the foothills and joined up. They were related, I guess, in what I've read in later years anyway. They were related to the Blackfoot tribe, and they would go out there in the fall, and this is where they got their hides and their meat and so on and so forth. And they had horses. They had lots of horses. There was no problem there. But it wasn't until after years that the Flathead country below Libby, Montana, where this Joe had the post, as that country became populated, there was elk and deer and whatnot there. They gradually pushed that game up into these Kootenays, and that's where the game came from. And I've talked to people, and very few people know this, that the Hudson Bay was in there. Another thing, too, you would think the supplies would have come from the east, we'll say from Calgary, but like they didn't. They came from Portland down on the Columbia River, and that was all brought up and into Spokane, Washington, and then they had pack trains that went back and forth and brought it in there. So that is one man that was in the fur industry that I had the pleasure of knowing, albeit it was as a boy, but he's very vivid in my memory. He was quite a character, believe you me. Now the second man that stands out in my mind is a man by the name of Harry Yerbury, and he died 2 months ago at Creston. Now he was a neighbor of ours at this little community of Huscroft where we lived. And in 1924, that's the first year that the government of BC, prior to 24, there was nobody really owned a trap line. You just went and you trapped wherever you wanted to. But in 24, they broke the province down into trap lines, and this is where Harry, and he got a trap line in what they call the boundary country, and that was west of Creston, south of the Salmo Creston Highway now. Today, he had a beautiful trap line in there. I trapped one winter with him, the winter of 36, 37. And he came to me that fall when he was going to go in. He used to go in the fall, take all the supplies in, and then he would stay there all winter. He didn't come out. And this winter he came to me and he said, I was only, 16, I guess I was 16 years old, and he said to me, you know, he said, I'm getting fed up with this thing of trapping alone. He said, it sure gets lonesome. He said, how about coming with me this winter? And of course, being a kid, I just jumped right at him, you know, to go trapping like that. But my dad was very, very ill at that time, and he was to die shortly afterwards, and we were having pretty tough sledding, and I know now that Harry took me out there so I could earn a few dollars, which were badly needed. But that was a very, very interesting winter because one thing I do remember, and that was a snowfall. And this was the winter after the Cooley Dam was built on the Columbia River west of Spokane. And the snowfall in that area that winter was about 4 feet more than usual. And we just fought all winter to keep the stovepipes on the cabins from getting snowed over. And it's interesting that about 1964 or thereabouts, I was having coffee one day at the Devlin Coffee Shop. That's before the old coffee shop on the Needles Ferry site, before they raised the lake here. And there was a gentleman from Hydro came in and sat down beside me, and I got talking with him, and I happened, you know, to tell him about this, or asked him. He was an engineer anyway. He introduced himself, and I said, well, I wonder if this area here, when this is flooded, will be like the country in I forget the name of the forest in northern Idaho there. It doesn't matter anyway, but this is where this heavy snowfall come. And he looked at me and he said, were you in that country at the time? And I told him yes, and the circumstances. And yes, he said, we're looking at that now. Because he said that was quite unique. He said there was 2 years after that dam was put in, and we backed that water up just about to the border, and the snowfall was very, very heavy in there. And I well remember it because I was the guy that had to get up on the roofs and shovel that snow so we could get the smoke up the stovepipe. But further to that, Harry will go down in the fur industry. The first winter that he trapped in the winter of 24, he got the idea that he was going to raise marten. So he caught 3 or 4 pair of marten, and he built pens at his home or on the land that he owned. But first year went by and no little marten, second year and third year and the fourth year and the fifth year. And finally on the fifth year, he kind of gave up in disgust. And he'd been pairing this marten, and he'd been putting them together pretty near every 2 months of the season. And he wasn't having any success, so finally he got a little bit disgusted, and he threw the whole half dozen or 8 or 10 marten, whatever he had, he just threw them into one pen and forgot about them. And lo and behold, the next spring, along about March, all at once he's got a litter of marten. He only got 1 litter out of the whole bunch, because but this was something, eh? Then he had to start from square one. Somewhere along the way, he didn't know what month of the year these marten did their breeding. And it turned out it's in July, and they have a gestation period of 9 months. And this was a sticker. And believe it or not, he holds the distinction of being the first man in North America to raise a litter of marten. It took him another year or two by pairing these marten, but he finally got into it. And once he got into it, he started raising marten, and he populated quite a few areas in North America here. I remember one year, it must have been about 30s, or no, it'd be later than that, maybe about 34 or something. He shipped a bunch of marten to the Ontario government, and they were turned loose at below Hudson Bay. It's in that area where that big dam has been put in now, or a few years ago, on that Ontario and Quebec. And he certainly got a nice price for them too. But I have a price list here. I'm not going to get off the subject for a moment, but I just noticed here I've got price lists from 1919 to 79, and then I have a trap list for this year. And I noticed if that was about 34 or 35, the price was really good on marten. I speak about marten mainly because this is what I know the further. I don't know anything about foxes or anything like that. But anyway, he was certainly an interesting man. And he was our neighbor there for a long time, and of course I've seen him throughout the years. He never married, he was a bachelor. And I sometimes wonder, I never seen that man, he never washed a dish. When he got through with his plate, he just scrubbed it off with a piece of bread, and he sat it over. He turned his coffee cup upside down. The frying pan, he took what excess grease there was and poured it in the fire. So help me, he never did. I never seen him all that winter that I was with him there. So I did the same thing. We come out there and...
Stunted your growth, didn't it?
It sure did. Yeah, it sure did. But so anyway, that's 2. Now, we had a trapper here by the name of Bert Thorpe that passed away here the other day. And the first time I met was Bert, it would be in 1944. I was going up oh goodness, one of our tug captains here, Brian Crowley, he and I were going up to Albert Point with a tug. We had to take a cabin off the beach there that the company had put up, and Bert had been in town here, and he got a ride back up to Fostal. And this is when I first met Bert, and then of course I always knew him fairly well through the years, because us old-timers that knew Bert, and when the roads opened up so we get in there, we always would stop for his mail and see that his mail got out to him, or we'd stop and see if he needed anything, and if we did, we would get it for him here in town, and maybe perhaps we wouldn't be going out ourselves, but we could see that he got it. And he was a very interesting man too. However, I guess all of us, our time comes, and so did his. I have on that Harry Yearbury, I had a friend send me a Creston paper here about 5 years ago. And maybe you'd like to look at them. There's a little write-up on them, but it was kind of interesting. He was quite a man.
Look at the snowshoes here.
But that's as true as I live there. I never did know him to wash a dish, and if you can live to 90 years old, I think we're missing the boat somewhere. That really was the other than muskrat trapping, which I did throughout while I was growing up, but never not having a trap line there. The only thing I could trap was the valley bottom and the private farms and whatnot, which I did, and I trapped muskrats. But that was the only time I was out on a trap line until about 1970. And I bet Harry Murphy doesn't know this either. In 1970, I bought a trap line that extended from Arrow Park up to Fostal on this facing mountain here from Young Stack. And because I had a boy who was very interested in the outdoors, and I wanted to point him in this direction. And so I bought this trap line, and I got thinking one day, I bought it in the fall, and we trapped it that winter, and then the following summer I was sitting at home one day, and I was thinking about that Mosquito Creek trap line, because Mosquito Creek had never been trapped. You would know that, Harry.
It was reserved for the Indians, as you remember.
Well, this is the whole thing. You know what I did?
Early days before Stack got it.
I got thinking about this, and I thought, well, if the Indians own this, they'll lease most anything.
Yeah.
So I wrote to the Indian department, you know, about leasing this trap line, and if it would be possible to do so, and if so, how much, and so on and so forth. And 2 weeks later, I get a letter back saying they had nothing to do with that trap line, and never had. It may have been owned by an Indian, but he had let it go because it hadn't been trap rights numbered. And they suggested that I go to our local conservation officer and apply for it. So a stamp at that time was 8 cents. So for 8 cents to write a letter to them, and then for $5 to get the trap line, this is how I wound up with the trap line. So, but of course I was working at that time, and it was strictly a weekend trapping. But I retired a few years ago, and then I trapped in the winter with a friend of mine who had the Fostal. Bert Thorpe used to let him trap his line there after Bert retired, and that was really interesting because it's so different when you're retired. The first thing you do, you should do, is take your watch and throw it in the garbage pail because you don't realize how that darn thing dictates your life till you retire. And that's what I've more or less done. But we used to go out there. It's so different, you know. When I was working and when I was trapping, it was always rush, rush, rush. And after the retired, you could go out on your snowmobile, and if you seen a track that you were interested in, you could stop. You're never in any hurry, and that's when I really enjoyed it. However, now I don't go out anymore. I have the son. I turned it over to my son, and he looks after it. But anyway, because we're later day trappers, the scene has changed an awful lot. Methods of trapping have changed, and of course the traps have changed, and this is all to the good. And of course, a little reference book here so I can keep my thoughts in order. One thing that most trappers do today, and that of course they're encouraged to do, and that's conservation of fur-bearing animals. And we follow this. That's a pretty fair-sized line we have, and we break it down into 3 areas. And so that means every third winter we're trapping a particular area, and this way we keep our stocks up of our marten. And I'll give you an example of that. You know, for instance, one winter we'll trap from Arrow Park to Fostal on that line, and it's 21 miles, and we lay out a trap approximately every mile. And the last winter that I trapped it, was 3 winters ago, so it'll be trapped again this coming winter, but I got 20 martin off of that line that winter, and there was only 3 boxes that I didn't get a martin in. So that shows you that there's a very good distribution of that animal when you can get a martin every mile, and when you can, and that's what we got the 3 years prior to that. So that tells us that we're handling that line in the way it should be handled, because it's reproducing, coming along all the time. And of course now they've outlawed, there's only 4 species that you can use this type of trap on, this old lake hold trap, and it's got to be modified like this, or I seen a new trap with rubber jaws on it, which you can use, and that's the wolf, and yeah, the gentleman has it there, the wolf, the coyote, and the bobcat, and the lynx. But the marten and the mink and so on, and animals like that, they must be trapped with this conibear trap, and this is what they call a killer trap. Now this isn't the only one. There's other models. There's one here that I see Milton has brought in, and like me, I don't know just how that is set. I would like to know. It must be a patent. Have you any idea? No, I don't either. But we've had awfully good success with this conibear trap here. They're an ugly looking thing, but the idea is to kill your animal right off the bat, because this means money to you. An animal is struggling in a trap or whatever, dirty fur and every other thing. And that, now, I like this setup here. Every trapper's got a different different mode of how they trap a marten. But we like this setup. We put a pole between 2 trees, probably 6 feet apart, and 2.5, 3-inch pole, and I wire them to the tree with this for the simple reason if a violent windstorm comes up and sways the trees, if I'd nailed that pole on there, it'd probably tear that pole off at one end and the trap would go on the ground. But on the wires, they can work like this, and when you come back next fall to go over your line, it's still there. So that's the reason for the wires. But anyway, now baits. When I started off, of course, I had the usual thing. I had beaver meat and beaver casters, and I would come home after setting out 20 or 30 of those traps, and I smelled like you wouldn't believe. And my wife said to me one day, she said, "Holy smoke," she said, "there's got to be something better than that." And it happened that Esther and I had gone up to a Trappers Association meeting up at Prince George. Every spring at the end of March, they have a meeting there. All the trappers come in. And this is where your oil company people come in, or your oil people come in, and your forestry people, and your government people, and all the trappers, and you have a real go-around. And anyway, I got talking to a trapper there, and got talking about baits and whatnot, and it turned out that he told me all he used, he ground up raisins, and he put aniseed oil in, which has a sharp, tart smell to it, but it's not offensive. And then this is glycerine, which you mix in with this paste, and the reason you use glycerine, it won't freeze. And of course, this is important when you got 15 or 20 below weather, that your bait and your scent. So I'd make a paste of that, where you can just take a bit and put in the back of that box, and then you put your trap in there, like so. And the reason I got nails here, as you can see, some of these old marten are as bad as a wolverine. You've all heard about a wolverine going down the line and reckoning on eating all the bait and everything. Well, some of those old marten are just smart enough that they'll, without this, something to keep that trap in there, they learn to pull it out, and then away they go, and pretty soon you come along and you go over 20 miles of line and everything's sprung. So that's the reason of that. I also take, if I get a deer in the fall, I cut strips of deer hide about 2 inches square, and got to be very, very careful. You harden the fingers. Take some of that aniseed oil and put it under the deer hair, and then you put that up on a limb, and with the hair running down. And the reason for this, if the rain or the snow, it'll run off, but it won't wash the scent out of that. So you got that scent all the time. A marten is a very, very easy animal to catch. Really, it's curiosity more than anything that catches them. If they smell something or see something like that, and they'll come right to it. So anyway, that's our method. So, and from there, of course, once you've got your animal, you're skin them, and you skin them inside out, or you skin them so hang them up, and then bring the fur down off them, so you end up with the fur in, and then the bare hide outside, and all you do then, or all we do, you just run that inside the marten skin, and just pull it fairly tight, not too tight, and you just peg the legs, the 2 legs, and once you've got them pegged, then we take these and run them up inside the fur, one on either side like this, and then we have little blocks like this. This is just to tighten the hide, to stretch, and they don't like them stretched too much either, so you just run it in until you get the hide taut, and then you just leave that for 24 hours or less, depending on the temperature of the room you got it in, and then when it doesn't take very long to dry that hide. They're not all that heavy. Then usually the next day you just go in and you turn that hide inside out, and then you do the same thing again. You just tack it down and leave it for a couple of days, and then take it off and hang it up, and that's all there is to it. Now that's marten or a squirrel. The weasel are just left with the skin out, and so are the mink. That's the way they like them.
What about squirrel?
Squirrel is fur out. You got to turn a fur, a squirrel, the same as you do. And these little things, everything, a lot of this is just homemade. All these are. It used to be that we used to skin the feet right out of it, and with the claws on the marten, but they don't like that anymore. Too many of these buyers that get looking through the pile and they get all scratched up. So now they say take the feet off. So all we do with these, we just put them in the leg holes, just let the air go through, so they cure, and that's it, basically.
You want to describe each of these traps now, Slim, a little bit?
Yeah, I can do that. Well, this is what they call a conibear model, and this is for marten or mink. They have one a little bit bigger, and we never buy them because this handles everything. We use these on. I've caught skunk with them. I've caught marten. I've caught mink, and of course, squirrels are always. That's perhaps an interesting thing, and I'll just bring it up. It's surprising how few squirrels we have in this country compared to the North Country. I know the first time I went up to one of those meetings, and it was, I think the first sales had been in the first part of January, so everybody was getting their invoices, and of course those that had shipped to Pappas at Vancouver and to Edmonton and whatnot, and they're all comparing notes. So I got to see quite a few of these invoices that these people were getting, and they were mostly northern trappers. There was only maybe about 6 of us from the lower part of the country here. But it was nothing to see where they had caught 600 or 700 squirrels during the winter. And at that particular year, they were averaging around about $1.75. Well, that was a lot of skidoo gas for those people. But we don't have that here.
That's a modified trap, isn't it?
This one? Mm-hmm. Yes, we modified this. We put this metal on, these metal strips on, because otherwise you have a gap here, once they get worn a bit, you might even have almost half an inch. And what we found, the marten whereas they weren't getting out of them, but they were struggling. They weren't doing the job of killing them, and then we were getting bruises and we were getting torn hides, and right away the price of your pelt drops about $15–20, something like that. So they came out. Well, in fact, we get one of these trapping regulations every year, and the one year it came out showing how they could be modified, and so we went to this, and I'll never forget when we did this first one, I said to my son, I said, my God, I said, that's going to cut a marten in half. But he said, no, I said, I don't think so, and he was right, but it sure does a good job. I've actually seen marten go into a trap with this, and well, I was about 200 yards from a trap one day when I seen a marten come down. I was watching him come down the hillside, and he went right into the trap. And by the time I got to the trap, at 200 yards, he was dead. So you can't do much better than that.
What about the poor guy here?
Yeah, well, this is a. Now, you see, this is what happens. That's kind of grisly, I know, but that's just the way we left. That's what happens with this sort of a trap. You can see the foot. I believe that was a squirrel. I don't think it was a marten, but that, it cuts the leg right off of them. So no wonder, people start to protest.
Didn't they call it a kangaroo trap?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, years ago. That's right.
Yeah, kangaroo trap.
Isn't it now referred to as a jump trap?
And a jump.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a story on that, Ranny. Maybe I told you before. There was a fellow drove in the yard. This is in the 70s, I guess. A big station wagon, a big cowboy hat on, big cowboy boots, all slicked up. Real cowboy. Ran from down the station. I noticed the license plate was Illinois. He jumps out and he says, hey, I understand you know where there's some trappers' cabins, but maybe it's got some traps in them, or the old artifacts, dishes and some of those things you used to poke in the wall, those candle holders, like the miners use. And I got thinking, yes, I do know where there's one. There was one up Halfway Creek, it was old Michael Grady's. They hadn't got into that country yet with their logging road. But you know where the hot springs are then Halfway? Just above the springs. Not the St. Lin Springs, Halfway Springs.
Halfway, yeah, right.
Right above the falls there. But I said they're quite a ways back. At that time you had to walk right from the lake. And he says, oh, I don't care. He was standing out in the yard. He says, if I have to walk over that mountain to get something like that, I'll go. Or I'll get a helicopter or something. And he said, have you got time to go up and show me? And I said, no, I haven't. Well, can you get somebody that knows? And Vic Scout. Was it Vic?
Vic, yeah.
Didn't see me, no, I don't know. Well, anyway, it didn't matter. I got somebody hired a boat, went up the lake, St. Leon, he rented a boat, and I thought, well, I'll never see him again. And 2 or 3 days later, he drives up in the yard and he jumps out, and oh boy, was he ever happy. He says, come and look. And the back of his station wagon was full of traps, and that's what he was after, those kangaroo traps.
Is that so?
Yeah.
So.
And he says, I've been all over U.S. looking for traps like that.
Yeah.
And he said, he went on and he said, boy, that was a dandy find. He says, I got everything. Look, I got everything in here. He even brought the cans with some old flour and baking powder cans and all them old cans they used to use to put tobacco cans, snooze cans, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And he says, man, is there a bar around here? And I said, well, there isn't, but there's Legion up here. Oh, he says, I'm a veteran. He says, I got an American card, we can go up there. So we had to go up, and he hands me
$20, you know, American money, which is quite a bit of money in those days, or $20. And I said, what's that for? He says, that's finder's fee. Well, I went up to have a drink with him. He wanted to buy everybody a drink in Nakusp. And he was telling me that he owned some taverns in Chicago. And he was building another one. He wanted to make it into a trapper's theme. A trapper's theme. An old type of log building inside with all the trapping stuff hanging around, you know. And that's what he was after. And he says, I've been traveling all over North America, and I got word that up through this southern British Columbia there might be something that's, you know, still around. And
should have charged him $1,000.
yeah, I thought
Well, yeah, you should have told him.
Well, anyway, we have
Well, isn't this the same as that one?
Yeah.
I still got his card. He said, "You ever
That's
this
a
is
knot.
soft."
That's a knot. That's the smallest size they put out, and then this was a 1. And this is why they're a lot more vicious. They're so much stronger.
I see.
In fact, you and I were talking about these traps, you know, this is environmentalists. They went after us to outlaw this trap. And yet we could use this one when this started up about 6-7 years ago, eh? My goodness, I'm not afraid to set that trap and stick my fingers on it because, you know, I'll get nipped, but we used them years ago, just small lots for marten, and we never lost any marten. But here's an example of what happens. So sometimes you wonder about people's thinking. No, yeah, that's right. This, I don't know how old this trap would be, but this is an old trap. You notice the spring of the teeth on it. Why in the name of goodness they would want teeth like that, I don't know, but they did, and there it is. But that is an old trap.
That something the same as this bear trap?
Same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got the teeth in it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you see another thing, well, now you can only have on this type of trap, well not on this trap, these are outlawed, you can't use them, but on these modified leg holes you can only have a chain on them that's 1 foot long. And of course the reason for that being is that the animal can't jump around that much and struggle. Actually 3 or 4 inches would be enough, but anyway, but we just welded a piece of welding rod in there.
Kept it close.
But
Well, those, excuse me, those was a big chain, you know, they used to wrap around a 4-foot chunk of wood.
drag, yeah.
Drive that,
Yeah.
Well,
drag into the log, and
Yeah.
so they drag it around, you see.
Isn't that a bear trap on the end there? That big one,
Yeah.
Slim? That one over
This here?
there?
No, this is I'm going to point out, this is a beaver. Pretty nice fur too. But anyway, we use this conibear on beaver. You got to almost have a machine. We do. We have a kind of a wrench for closing these springs. But beaver is, and we usually use these on where they're going over their dam. We just set one of these in, or perhaps a runway of some kind, or at the entrance to a beaver lodge. And these are deadly. These are really strong. And I've yet to see a beaver. You know, all we do when we set that trap is a spring. These springs are out either side, and you just put a stake through each one of these and then through the spring just to hold it. And I've never yet had a beaver pull those pegs out. It just it hits them on the back of the head and on the spine, and that's it. They're gone.
I think you should explain to him too, well, any one of these, but I always thought when these traps were like a mouse trap and you put the bait here. But
No,
explain to them
no.
how a trap works. It's really something to fix.
Yeah, well, we just set a little one here. It's all the same thing. But I tell you what, a lot of trappers have done with these, you know. They've, this one jaw here, they have welded that. They'd weld this one. And then this jaw comes down, and they set that So the animal has to go through underneath here, and it make a humane trap out of it, because when he's caught in between the jaws here, but he isn't caught by the foot, he's caught by the neck. And that works pretty well too. Because for some trappers, I mean, let's face it, down here in the South Country, we're small potatoes compared to the North. They're probably running 200 or 250 traps, where we're probably only running 30 here. So quite a difference. But you see, if that was, you'd have to set this. But if that was welded up like that, you'd have to set your trigger so it was further down. And then, we'll say we're going to use this for squirrels. We just set it so the squirrel had to come through here. And once he poked through there, why, he's caught either around the chest or around the neck, and that's it.
The point is the bait is on the other side of the trap.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing as this box. You either another reason for using this box up in the air. Years ago, we just made cubbies on the ground, and we put these traps in. We just make little cubbies. We still do as far as link are concerned, but for marten, we would just make a cubby on the ground. But the trouble was, you lost a lot of fur because, number one, the mice got to them and took a chunk out of them, and then that spoiled the fur. And marten are cannibalistic; they eat each other. So if marten comes along, I remember I had to trap up Plant Creek there one day, and I could see it for about a quarter of a mile away, and I broke down over a hillside, and I could see I had a nice big marten, and that always makes you feel good, you know, with X number of dollars. And anyway, when I got to it, he was in the trap, but there was other marten tracks all around, but, you know, the marten was okay. He was dead, but, so I took him out, and I brought him home, and I went to skin him, and so help me, that other marten had bit the one in the trap. Now this was a tree set. I had the box on a tree, and the marten was just hanging alongside the trunk. And that marten was so badly bitten, I couldn't finish skinning him because there was just nothing there. And I probably lost at that time I lost about $50. And that's why we like this set here. It's out on a pole, and you can set it 5-6 feet high. And when the animal comes, it's caught in the trap, he just hangs straight down there, nothing else can get at him. And that means a lot. Mm-hmm. Some places in, like the East Kootenai there, though, they tell me they're having problems with ravens in that type of a set. So they've almost have to build a longer box here, a really long box, put the trap in about here, so when the marten's caught, he stays in there. So they're different. Everybody has their problems.
What's wrong with just having a box like a bear cage where they walk into it, the door shuts, and they stay there? Would they go wild and kill, wreck their fur?
No, they wouldn't. No, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people do use that, and then they carry a big hose with them, and they stick the hose on the end of the exhaust pipe and put it into that box you're talking about, and that's it.
Better than a rifle.
Yeah. So there's all different ways of doing it, So anyway, there's I have some material here. If you're interested, you could look at it. There's how plans.
I was looking through some of those at Slim's place, the prices, and it's quite interesting to see the price in 1919 and then the different years, how it went up and down, and during the Depression, how many people were out trapping at that time.
Yeah, that's for sure. During the Depression, isn't that funny, eh? The prices were good. Let me see here, 34 for that time, anyway. Around the 30s, the prices were around $20 to $25. And then in the mid-30s, they came down around $12. But I knew trappers. For instance, Bert Crummett, that lived just across town here, trapped the tributary of the St. Mary's River there, north of Marysville in the 30s. And that country, We had terrible fires in, I guess, probably all over the province, but I remember because I was there. The Elk Valley burned out, for instance, in the mid-30s, and there was a fire went up through the little Moyer, jumped over on the big Moyer, went up through the back of Lumberton, and then up into this area where Bert trapped. And those valleys were just burnt right out, and the only timber would be up in the creeks, up near the headwaters. There'd probably be a little, and Bert trapped these. I'm telling you, that was a lot of work slogging up and down those mountains. And one winter he took 10 marten, and he thought, and he did. That was a 10 marten at say $12. That was 120 bucks. And boy, when you think that a man and wife and 2 children were getting $14 on relief, you know.
Almost a year's salary.
Yeah, he was single and he had $10 for every month of that year just through his trapping. Mind you, he got in the bottoms, he got some beaver and some coyote, all right, which supplemented it. But there was fellas, you know, that did that. Same with cougar, eh? I remember a chap there was a $40 bounty on cougar at that time. And he followed cougar. He didn't have a dog. He was following this track on foot, and it went into a cave. And by golly, he sat and he watched that cave for a week until that cougar come out and he got a shot at it, and he got that $40. And that was big money. That was, you know, so that's the way it went.
2 months later. Yeah. Yeah, those.
But what I was going to get at, you know, why is it when there's a bit of a recession, everybody wants to buy a fur coat? You know, during the mid-30s or during the 30s, the prices were pretty fair, and you know there was a good demand for fur. And then when we really got up into the big money, during when we started out in the 70s, we were only getting $9 and $10 for a marten. And I remember we got a beautiful coyote there, and we got $17 for it. A couple of winters ago, I got a shot a coyote, a really nice hide, and I got $109. And we're supposed to be in a recession. Eh? Strange.
Yeah. Right.
But you know, here's some of the prices that were quoted last fall, but some of them are higher. But just to give you, this only goes to 79, and in 79 we were getting about 20 average. Well, we weren't averaging 20. They've got it at $21 here, but I know there were some of them that we got a lot less than that. But here we have marten on a sale, first sale there last winter for this area. They were bringing up to $70, but on the later sale, we got as high as $103 last winter, and we averaged $65 for marten.
Good money. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. I think we should give Slim a good hand.
If you had told Harry Murphy 20 years ago that I'd be standing up in front of a bunch of people talking, he'd have bet the farm that I wouldn't do it.
Well, it shows you how good you're at.
But I tell you what it is, Harry, when you get a captive audience, there's nothing to it.
No.